Leaders.
My name is Henrik Hammargren. I'm the executive director of the Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation. Dag Hammarskjöld was the second Secretary General to the United Nations, and he unfortunately died in a tragic plane crash in the Congo in 1961. Thinking about the diplomatic relations between Tunisia and Sweden, it's interesting for us to reflect how important Tunisia was in the time when Dag Hammarskjöld was in office as Secretary General in the UN. When, like now, Tunisia was also a member of the Security Council, playing an instrumental role in getting one of the most important peacekeeping missions in place in the then Congo. Hammarskjöld worked in very close relationship with Tunisia, and especially also your famous diplomat Mongislim, who later became the president of the General Assembly in 1961. The Dag Hammarskjöld Foundation works in the legacy of Dag Hammarskjöld, and we work on 4 thematic areas. We work on sort of in defense of multilateralism, in upholding the value of the UN Charter and the UN's unique role in the multilateral system. We also work with the implementation of the Global Sustainable Goals and the Agenda 2030, with a specific focus on the role of the UN, looking at the role, how the UN needs to adopt itself and sort of reposition itself to be even more relevant in the quest for the implementation of the SDGs. We have a specific focus on building and sustaining peace, and in that work we work in very close relationship with the UN system, with the Peace Building Support Office, and looking at the now priorities of Tunisia in its Security Council role. It's important to remember the focus of women in peace and security, but also youth, the new resolution 2250. And I think this dimension is something that can be very important for Tunisia and its role in the Security Council. There are many links between sort of Hammarskjöld's work and what he achieved as the Secretary General. He was also very much involved in the mediation in the situation in Bizerte, a situation that was, of course, developed in a very tragical way, in which he tried to mediate. That was unfortunately not one of his more successful roles, as he only met with one of the 2 parties in the conflict, as France was not really allowing him to play the role of a Secretary General in the constructive way as we have seen him done in so many other times. But coming back to this situation in the Congo, this is really where he had an excellent sort of relationship with Tunisia, and Tunisia was also instrumental in moving from a thought into action, and I can show you a little bit more in details of that plan. The crisis escalated in the Congo, and especially after the tragic killing of the President Lumumba, things quickly deteriorated, and the UN had to take a much more active role. This is how Hammarskjöld envisaged the whole idea of an operation in the Congo. This was his sketch, and later his closest aide in this process, Sir Brian Urquhart, translated this into a more sort of easy way to understand the operations. This is how it later turned out, and if you actually look at this, this is pretty much still the command structure that you have within UN peacekeeping. So it's interesting how this actually evolved. It evolved in less than 2 weeks' time, and Tunisia had a very crucial role in actually assisting in taking the decision to deploy the troops, and they were both from the US and from Russia at the time. In 2015 we were honoured by a visit by your late president, and it was a very special occasion, and on his state visit to Sweden, the Hammarskjöld Foundation was one of the places that he was really insisting in coming to, and he had a particular reason for that. he met with Hammarskjöld on one of his last trips when preparing for the Congo, but also on his own engagement in Tunisia. He was then a young man serving as a security officer in charge of Hammarskjöld's visit. So on his visit he actually handed over this painting, or sorry, this picture with him and Hammarskjöld meeting in Tunis. And I think it was one of these fantastic rare opportunities to meet a person who very closely got to know and work with Hammarskjöld. So we very much appreciated the late President's visit to our foundation, and he was also accompanied with by the Swedish King. Reflecting a little bit about what these celebrations of 60 years of diplomatic relations between Sweden and Tunisia could actually be about from our perspective, I think there's a lot of interest in understanding and perhaps also learning from each other regarding Tunisia's last developments. It's a young democracy. It's a very interesting and very important development in the region. I think Tunisia's role in the Security Council will hopefully reflect this in many ways. We need to learn a lot more about the challenges that Tunisia is facing and how it can be supported. And of course, from our perspective, this is what we look at. We look at international cooperation, we look at international development, sustainable development, and it's also fundamentally important, the priority that Tunisia is taking on climate change. So there are many opportunities looking at this from a long-term perspective, from 5 to 10 years. I think these are areas that we should really try to deepen our understanding about the common challenges that we face, both in terms of supporting the multilateral engagement and system in these efforts, but also on a national basis. There's opportunities to engage more, both in terms of tourism and perhaps in research in these areas, but of course that's nothing that the Foundation is working with. So coming back to understanding perhaps more about Tunisia's transition, and also given the need to better understand social uprisings and demands and protests that we see today, and that we also know will be an increasing priority for the UN. So I think these are areas that could be very interesting to explore.
Leaders.